Hello, this is a slideshow to give you an introduction to building family trees through Clan Henderson Society Genealogy. If you are a member of Clan Henderson Society, you can ask us to help you. All we ask is that you give us some background information so that we know where to start. There are a lot of platforms on which you can build your trees. These would include things like Ancestry, Genie, WikiTree, and Family Search, as well as a number of other programs that have a lot of additional information. Each of them have benefits and risks. So if we look at those that I mentioned, Ancestry is probably the most expensive. It has a large scale of research available. Family Search is free. The records base of Ancestry is very large, especially for United States records. In terms of who supervises the trees, on Ancestry and MyHeritage, you own the tree, but in Genie and Wiki, other people own the tree because they're trying to connect you into a one-world tree. So let's look first at Ancestry. If you open a subscription, you'll see, and enter some of the first people, you'll see a tree that looks something like this. And then as you put a few people in, you will get some green leaves. Those green leaves indicate that they have a hint for you to follow. So open up the hints, but be very careful about which hints you accept. You want to not perpetuate errors that other people have made in their trees. So if you copy somebody else's tree, be very careful. Watch the names and locations to make sure that you're getting the right people. And use primary resources. Unreliable sources would just compile other people's trees and just put in information that somebody else might have put in, like sometimes on Find a Grave. On Find a Grave, many of them are very good and have a lot of helpful information, but sometimes it's somebody's opinion based on their own research, not necessarily on fact. Here's one I found looking for my great-grandfather Henry. It's a telephone directory and says that he lived in Council Bluffs in 1928. It's not true. I mean, this is a different Henry because my Henry always lived in northwest Iowa. So even with the primary sources, be careful that you read the material to make sure it corresponds with the rest of the material that you've been researching. Another thing to watch for is if you have somebody moving back and forth between Scotland and Iowa or some such thing, investigate that very carefully. It's not likely they move back and forth, back and forth. Some trees actually suggest that. Here's an example of a tree that is based solely on other people's ancestry trees. So maybe the information is okay, but it's highly suspect because it doesn't have any primary sources. As I said, always use primary sources. Some things that are just collections of other people's genealogies can have errors. Now this one might, by and large, be very good, but there are errors in it because it's based on other people's genealogies. For example, in this you'll find Thomas Henderson, supposedly of Jamestown, a descendant of Fordell Hendersons. This is an error. This Thomas Henderson never existed. He is not recorded in Jamestown's records. He is created out of genealogy compilations, and his DNA does not match the DNA that we know is the signature for Fordell Hendersons. So be very careful about anything that's not a primary source. Now there are a lot of sources you can use that are not necessarily in Ancestry and so on. These would include things like newspapers, military records, citizenship records, court records, city directories, local histories, and other sources that are compilations of marriage and birth and so on, like Scotland's people. Obituaries can be a very valuable source to tell you about relatives and some instances in their lives. Here's a record from Scotland's people for my great-grandfather Henry, and you'll see that here you find not only the name of his father and mother and birth date, but also where he was born. This is an immigration record for Henry, and you see him listed there along with all the members of his family. This was a surprise to us because our family history had always told us that Henry didn't come over. And then it's also helpful to just search around with the other sites. So if you started on Ancestry, you might also check and see what's on Find My Past, Family Search, and WikiTree. Here's an example for my Henry in WikiTree. I typed it in and there were 225 matches for Henry Henderson. And so if I scrolled down through that long list of Henry Hendersons, I would find my particular Henry. And here he is, 1803 to 1877. Here you'll find information about his parents and his siblings and his wife and so on. You'll also find a contact person who posted this if you have any questions to share. If you go to Family Search, you see that you can search records, images, family trees, and so on. So there's lots of ways to look through there. I chose to look for the historical records, and then I chose to look for birth records. So you see that I put in the name, the birth location and dates, and so on. And I came up with lots of records, 404 actually. Here's Henry's actual birth record with his parents, and then the little symbol there on the right tells us that there is a tree that you can compare it to. Now cut off from this slide further to the right, there's also a symbol where you can click on the visual of the actual record. Following through with Find My Past, you'll see a screen that looks like this. I put in my Henry with his birth date, and I found that there were 18 records. This is the marriage record that they show for Henry. Again, it gives me the name of his wife, the location, and the date for the marriage. Another source would be Genie. Genie is one of those programs that tries to connect everybody into a one world tree. So let's follow my grandfather, Henry Henderson. And there you see him born in 1865. Now, if I didn't know anything beyond him, I would just put in there the information I have and see what other information might get connected. You notice on the top of each square there's a little blue tag. That tag suggests to you that there might be other matches to that person, either through another tree or through some records. You see the little green tree on the top right of some of the squares. That tells you that that person connects to a bunch of ancestors, those numbers of people beyond what's shown on this screen. If you're interested in Genie, Jim Henderson is putting together a tutorial specifically for Genie. Following on from our Henry, if we then expand the tree and take some suggestions, we see that on this slide that we've moved back to Robert of 1771 and then 2 more generations beyond him. You also see that if any males in this tree have done a DNA test and put their DNA type in there, then it shows up and gives you the genetic marker that should describe your line. So in this case, this line of Hendersons should be Z196. If you want us to help with your genealogy, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Here is our webpage address, and you can contact me as well, also listed on that webpage address. Thank you.